Ever get that feeling, after a movie? Like one gender just hogged all the lines.
Yeah, totally. And it turns out that feeling you have, well, it's not just anecdotal.
We're going deep today into a study that actually visualized how much men and women get to speak in popular movies.
It's fascinating stuff. This research went through over 2,000 movie scripts to see who's really driving the dialogue. And you know what? The results are pretty eye-opening, especially when you compare them to audience ratings for those same films.
I'm intrigued. So we're looking at data from the pudding today, right?
Exactly. They took 538 popular films, cross-referenced those with their IMDb ratings, and the percentage of female dialogue in each one.
Well, that's a cool way to combine different data points.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Small drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
Okay, so get this. Only 8% of popular films have a majority of female dialogue.
Wow.
We're going to deep dive into some research
Okay.
from the pudding. They analyzed over 2,000 screenplays, comparing how much men and women actually speak on screen. And then they went and linked this data with IMDb ratings.
Interesting.
So are you ready to rethink some of your favorite movies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this research offers some really powerful insights into just the dynamics of gender representation in film.
Yeah.
It's not just about who's on screen, but like you said, who's actually driving the conversation forward.
Right. It's about who gets to tell the story.
Exactly.
So how do they measure all of this?
Well, they focused on what they called non-trivial characters.
Okay.
So characters with at least 100 words of dialogue
Gotcha.
across these 2,000 screenplays.
Okay.
And then what they did is they plotted 538 films with over 200,000 IMDb ratings on a graph,
Okay.
with the percentage of female dialogue on one axis
Right.
and the film's rating on the other. And then the size of each dot reflects the number of votes the film received.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about characters who just have a couple lines.
No.
We're talking about characters with real agency in the narrative.
Exactly, yeah. Characters who are really moving the plot forward.
Okay.
And what's so striking right off the bat when you look at this chart is that there's this dense cluster of films with 0 to 40% female dialogue.
Wow.
We're talking about classics like Shawshank Redemption, The Godfather.
Oh, wow.
Films set in worlds that have traditionally been dominated by men.
Right. And that makes sense given those themes and the context. But I'm already wondering, is this just a reflection of the past or is there something more at play here?
I think that's a key question.
Yeah.
And I think when we look at the films on the other end of the spectrum,
Yeah.
so those 42 films
Okay.
with majority female dialogue, we see movies like The Help, Bridesmaids, even Mean Girls. These are films with high IMDb ratings, proving that, female-driven narratives can be both critically and commercially successful.
So it's not that audiences don't want to hear women speaking on screen.
No, absolutely not.
But there's a huge gap between those two groups.
Yeah.
Less than 10% of the films they analyzed have a majority of female dialogue.
It's pretty wild.
That's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, and I think it raises some really important questions about why this imbalance exists.
Yeah.
Is it a matter of historical precedent, genre conventions, or something else entirely?
Okay, let's unpack that. This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think one factor we can't ignore is the historical context, right?
Yeah.
Like, think about classic genres like Westerns, gangster films, war movies. I mean, they were practically built around male characters and perspectives.
Yeah, it's like those genres set the stage for decades of storytelling, often relegating women to supporting roles with limited dialogue.
Absolutely. And I think that historical legacy continues to influence filmmaking today.
Right.
But there's also the question of, who's making the decisions behind the scenes.
Yeah, you're talking about like the writers, directors, producers.
Exactly.
The people who are deciding which stories get told and how they get told.
Exactly. And for a long time, those positions were predominantly held by men.
Right.
And it's natural for storytellers to draw on their own experiences and perspectives.
Of course.
So it's no surprise that we see this reflected in the types of characters and narratives that have traditionally dominated Hollywood.
It makes you wonder if there were more women in those positions of power behind the camera, would we see a different kind of storytelling emerge?
That's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
And we can't forget about audience expectations.
Right.
For decades, Hollywood operated under this assumption that, films with female leads wouldn't appeal to a wide audience.
Oh, so it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
If studios don't invest in these diverse stories,
then audiences don't get exposed to them.
Right.
And then the cycle continues.
Exactly. And the good news is I think we're starting to see a shift in those expectations.
Yeah.
Audiences are proving that they are hungry for stories that reflect a wider range of experiences and perspectives.
Yeah. Look at the success of films like Wonder Woman or Captain Marvel.
Exactly.
These are female-led superhero movies that have shattered box office records.
Exactly. Those films are such great examples of how studios can challenge these traditional genre conventions and still find massive success.
Right.
And it's not just about gender either.
Yeah.
We're seeing greater representation of different races, ethnicities, LGBTQ plus characters as well.
It feels like this research from the pudding gives us a real snapshot of where we are, but it also feels like we're at a turning point.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think there's this growing awareness of the need for more diverse storytelling.
Totally.
Both in front of and behind the camera.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a really exciting development. Of course, not every story needs to have a perfectly balanced cast or equal dialogue distribution.
Right.
Sometimes the narrative itself kind of dictates these choices.
Yeah, think about a historical drama set in a specific time period. Yeah. Or, a film about a group of friends at an all-girls school.
Yeah.
In those cases, the gender balance is kind of inherent to the story.
Right. But the key is to be mindful of those choices. Like, are we using those settings and characters to reinforce tired stereotypes?
Exactly.
Or are we using them to explore complex and nuanced themes?
Yeah, I think that's where the real artistry comes in.
Yeah.
It's about telling authentic stories that resonate with audiences while also challenging us to think critically about the world around us.
This research really underscores how much representation matters.
Absolutely.
It's not just about checking boxes.
Yeah.
It's about reflecting the diversity of human experience on screen.
Absolutely. When we see ourselves represented in the stories that we consume, it validates our own experiences and helps us connect with others who might be different from us.
It expands our understanding of the world.
Yeah.
And allows us to empathize with characters and stories that we might not otherwise encounter.
Exactly. And that's one of the most powerful things about film is that it can transport us to different worlds, introduce us to new perspectives, and help us to see the world through different eyes.
So where do we go from here?
Okay.
We've uncovered this imbalance in who gets to speak in films. What can we do with this information?
Well, I think first and foremost, we need to continue having these conversations.
Yeah.
The more we talk about representation and inclusivity, the more we normalize it as a critical part of filmmaking.
And we need to hold the studios accountable for the types of stories they're telling.
Absolutely.
And the people that they're hiring.
For sure.
To tell them.
100%.
Yeah, it's not just about complaining about the lack of representation.
Right.
It's about actively seeking out and supporting films.
Yes.
That are doing things differently.
Exactly. And we can use our own platforms to amplify the voices of filmmakers and actors from underrepresented groups.
Yeah.
We can share their work, recommend their films, and help them to reach a wider audience.
It feels like we're on the cusp of a real sea change in Hollywood.
Yeah.
There's a growing demand for more inclusive storytelling, and audiences are proving that they're ready for it.
I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see a lot more diverse and innovative films in the years to come.
So what does this all mean for our listeners?
Okay.
Why should they care about who gets to speak in the movies that they watch?
Well, because it shapes our understanding of the world.
Yeah.
When we only see a narrow range of perspectives represented on screen, it limits our ability to empathize, connect, and engage with the full spectrum of human experience.
It's like looking at the world through a keyhole.
Right.
You might see a little bit,
Yeah.
but you're missing out on the bigger picture.
Precisely. And by being mindful of who's speaking, whose stories are being told, and whose voices are missing, we become more critical viewers.
Yeah.
And that makes us more informed and engaged citizens.
I think this deep dive has really opened my eyes to how much power we have as viewers.
Yeah.
We can demand better support change.
Yes.
And help to create a more inclusive and representative
for sure
cinematic landscape.
That's a really empowering thought.
It is.
It's not just about passively consuming entertainment.
Yeah.
It's about actively shaping the stories that we want to see in the world.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Absolutely.
We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration.
Yeah.
Of the ideas that are shaping our world. And it's not just about movies either, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
This whole idea of who gets to speak.
Right.
Whose stories are being told.
Yeah.
It applies to so many other areas of our lives.
It really does.
Like we see these same dynamics playing out in literature, in journalism,
absolutely,
politics.
For sure.
Even in our everyday conversations.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Like who has the platform?
Right.
Who is controlling the narrative?
Yeah.
These are questions that we should be asking constantly.
All the time.
And what I think is so powerful about this research from the pudding is that it gives us a really concrete way to visualize these imbalances.
It really does.
It takes these really abstract concepts of representation and power and turns them into something tangible.
Yeah, data can be such a powerful tool for driving social change.
Yeah.
It helps us to see the patterns, understand the scope of the problem, and measure our progress over time.
Yeah, it's like holding up a mirror to society and saying, okay, this is where we are. Now where do we want to go?
Exactly. And it empowers us to make more informed choices about the media we consume, the stories that we support, and the voices that we amplify.
Thinking back to those films with a majority of female dialogue, did the research highlight any common themes or trends within that group?
That's a great question. You know, while there wasn't one single formula for success, a lot of those films did share some interesting characteristics.
Okay.
A lot of them defied traditional genre conventions, blending elements of comedy, drama, and even action in ways that felt fresh and unexpected.
Like Bridesmaids, for example.
Yes, exactly.
It's hilarious. But it also deals with some really complex themes of female friendship and self-discovery.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then films like Thelma and Louise and Kill Bill, you know, subverted the male-dominated action genre by centering these strong, complex female characters who were both physically and emotionally powerful.
It's interesting to think about how these films use dialogue to challenge stereotypes and create multidimensional characters.
Absolutely. You see a lot of witty banter.
Yeah.
Sharp observations and honest conversations about the challenges and triumphs of being a woman in a world that's often designed for men.
So it's not just about giving women more lines. It's about giving them the space to express their full humanity on screen.
Beautifully said. And I think that's what audiences are responding to.
Yeah.
They're hungry for stories that feel authentic, relatable, and ultimately empowering.
I think this deep dive has really got me thinking about my own viewing habits. I want to be more intentional about seeking out films that challenge the status quo.
Absolutely.
And amplify diverse voices.
That's a great takeaway.
Yeah.
And there are so many incredible filmmakers out there pushing boundaries and telling stories that need to be heard.
So what's one concrete thing our listeners can do today to support more inclusive storytelling?
I would say look beyond the big studio releases.
Okay.
Check out independent films, documentaries, foreign cinema. That's where you'll often find the most innovative and thought-provoking stories.
And don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone.
Exactly.
Yeah. You might be surprised by what you discover.
You really might.
Yeah.
Challenge your assumptions, broaden your horizons, and let yourself be moved by the power of diverse storytelling.
This has been such a fascinating conversation.
I agree.
It's amazing how a single chart
right.
can spark so many questions and insights.
It really is. Yeah. It really highlights the power of data visualization to illuminate these social issues and inspire change.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope it's given you something to think about the next time you watch a movie.
Absolutely. And remember, the conversation doesn't end here.
Right.
Let's keep talking about representation.
Yeah.
Keep supporting diverse filmmakers and keep pushing for a more inclusive and equitable world.
Absolutely. Well said.